I came to Leavenworth because I needed somewhere quiet to fall apart without anyone noticing. The kind of town where people mind their own business and the mountains swallow whatever you don't want to think about. I told myself it was temporary. Just a couple weeks in a cheap motel room on the edge of town, surrounded by pine trees and postcard-perfect buildings that looked more European than American. It felt staged, like someone arranged the place to look calm, whether you believed it or not. Still, compared to Seattle and everything I'd screwed up there, this felt like breathing again, at least for a day. I was testing a new lens the next afternoon, walking along Front Street with a cup of burnt motel coffee in my hand, just warming up my hands, really. I snapped a few shots of shop windows, people passing by, the usual warm-up routine. But one picture stopped me. In the reflection of a bakery window, there was someone standing behind the glass, inside the shop, staring straight out at me. Tall shape, rigid posture, face angled perfectly toward my lens. I lowered the camera and looked up. No one was there. The bakery was empty except for a chalkboard sign and a stack of chairs. I checked the photo again. The figure was still in the shot, but stretched somehow, like the frame pulled it the wrong way. I told myself it was glare, bad autofocus, anything. But the lens shouldn't do that. That night, I was trying to convince myself I was just tired. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, flipping through the photos, deleting the ones that were out of focus. The room was silent, except for the heating unit clicking every few minutes. At some point, I felt something, a kind of pressure on the other side of the curtain, like someone standing too close to the window. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear breathing. Just that strange, heavy stillness. I got up, pulled the curtain open a few inches, and saw nothing but the parking lot lit by a single yellow bulb. No people, no movement, but there were footprints in the snow, fresh ones, leading straight to my door and stopping there, like whoever made them hadn't bothered turning around. I opened the door. Cold air hit me in the chest. The footprints ended at the threshold, but there weren't any going back, just a clean sheet of snow past that point, the kind that should have shown everything. I stood there longer than I want to admit, scanning the lot, trying to figure out if someone was messing with me, but the motel was quiet. Too quiet for a place that was supposedly fully booked. I shut the door, locked it, and sat back down with my camera on my lap. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, stress, paranoia, just bad timing and a weird photo. But deep down, even then, I knew my camera had seen something my eyes weren't ready to. Leavenworth settled into me slowly, like a place that didn't care whether you belonged or not. By the end of my first week, I'd slipped into a routine without meaning to. Mornings were for walking the main strip, grabbing a cheap coffee, and shooting whatever jobs I could pick up. Cafe menus, tourist portraits, a few promotional shots for a souvenir shop that insisted everything be authentic German, even though half their inventory was made in Ohio. People here were polite in a distant kind of way. Soft smiles, slow nods, quiet conversations. The air smelled like pine and bread, and the snow muffled everything down to a gentle hush. It should have been peaceful, and most of the time, it was. A kind of calm where nothing really happens, but you don't feel like you're waiting for anything either. Maybe that's exactly what I needed. I talked to a lot of people just to keep my head straight. Baristas, store owners, a retired couple who carved little wooden ornaments and sold them outside their home. They remembered my name by the second day. It felt strange, being noticed without feeling judged. I caught myself trying to sound more upbeat than I felt, like if I pretended long enough, maybe I'd actually believe I was starting fresh instead of running from everything I couldn't fix. I didn't tell anyone about Seattle, or the job I lost, or the relationship that fell apart so quietly it barely made a sound. But sometimes, sitting on a bench with my camera warm in my hands, I felt something close to grateful. Like this town was giving me a chance to breathe before deciding what comes next. I kept shooting for practice, texture shots, faces, little moments that might matter someday. One afternoon at the weekend market, I took a candid of an older woman arranging apples at her booth. Nothing fancy. But when the preview flashed on the screen, it wasn't her face. It wasn't even close. The woman in the photo was younger, darker hair, different jawline, same coat, same booth, same angle, different person. I blinked hard and checked again. The photo restored itself right in front of me. I didn't even press anything, just flickered and corrected. I stood there pretending to adjust settings so I wouldn't look like an idiot staring at my own camera. Firmware glitch, I told myself, shutter mirroring, cache issue, anything that didn't involve the idea that something was wrong with the world instead of my gear. I deleted the shot and moved on. A few days later, I met Marin Vale. It was mid-afternoon, the sun low enough to cast long shadows across the street. I ducked into a cafe to warm up and review some shots when she approached my table. She knew who I was by my camera model, which is either impressive or weird depending on how you look at it. Marin was still. Still in a way that made you aware of every tiny movement she didn't make. Her posture perfect, expression neutral, voice smooth but without texture, polite but cold. You couldn't read her even if you tried. "You're Grant, right?" she asked. "Yeah, that's me. I need a photographer, something discreet." She sat across from me like she'd already decided I'd say yes. Then she told me what she wanted. Find a woman around town who looked exactly like her, not similar, exact. She said the woman had been seen at cafes, bakeries, walking near the forest at odd hours. Marin didn't give any reasons, and I didn't ask. She only had one rule. I was never to approach the woman. Just take photos if I spotted her, then bring them straight to Marin. "No contact," she repeated. "Distance only." I nodded. "Okay, but why me?" Her eyes studied me for a moment before she answered. "You notice things. That's all I need." She offered a price that made me sit up a little straighter. Too much money for something that vague, but I needed it. Badly. When I agreed, she smiled just enough to register as human. "She'll show up," Marin said as she stood to leave. "They always do." I should have caught the wording then. They, but I was too focused on the number she'd written on the check. After I took the job, I started paying more attention around town. Not because I believed Marin's story, not yet, but because something had started bothering me in the background of things. Like a faint static you don't hear until the room goes quiet. One morning near the forest edge, a man stood perfectly still, staring at the tree line. Too still. I watched for almost a full minute before he finally moved, and when he did, it was like he remembered he needed to be human again. Another time, a woman stepped off the curb to cross the street and turned her head fully toward me before her shoulders followed, like her joints hadn't gotten the message in time. The one that stuck with me happened across the river trail. Someone was standing between the trees, half hidden in shadow, way too far to see clearly. But they were looking right at me. Not at my hands, not at my movement, at the lens itself. Dead on. I don't know how they could have noticed me from that distance. I lifted the camera out of instinct, but before I even focused, the figure stepped back and disappeared behind the pines. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Just people being weird, just my brain trying to fill in blanks. But Leavenworth had a way of staying quiet long enough for the wrong details to stand out, and once you notice one, you start seeing all the others. I didn't know it yet, But the job Marin gave me wasn't about finding someone. It was about noticing who wasn't supposed to be there. It didn't take long before I found someone who matched Marin's description, or at least I thought I did. It was a Thursday morning, quiet, the kind of cold that stings under your nails. I stopped by a small bakery on the corner, one of those places that smells like butter before the door even opens. While I was waiting for my coffee, I noticed her behind the counter. Same jawline as Marin, same hair color, same posture, straight, almost too straight. She didn't greet customers, didn't hand anyone their change. She just stood there watching the woman at the register work. When the cashier stepped away, the lookalike didn't move to take over. She didn't move at all. She didn't blink either. I lifted my camera for a quick shot. The moment I pressed the shutter, her face blurred into a smear like someone dragged a paintbrush across the image. I tried again, same result, different angles, different settings. Nothing came out clear, and every time I lowered the camera, she was staring directly at me, expressionless, as if she'd been waiting for that exact moment. Later that afternoon, I spotted another one, this time at the bus stop near Front Street. Same height as Marin, same hair, but the eyes, God, the eyes were wrong. They were wide open, unblinking, almost glossy. She wasn't waiting for the bus. She was standing next to the bench like someone put her there and forgot to hit resume. I pretended to check my phone, slowly angled the camera, and zoomed in. The closer I zoomed, the more her features warped. Her face stretched like the pixels were being pulled apart. The background was sharp, the bench was sharp. But her? She looked like a glitch trying to hold its shape. I dropped the zoom, tried a wider shot, still distorted. When I lowered the camera completely, she was suddenly facing me. Full body, no transition, no step, just there. My heart jumped into my throat. I walked away fast, pretending to cough so I wouldn't make eye contact. No footsteps followed me, no sound. But I swear, I felt something watching the back of my neck the whole way down the street. I needed to know if it was just bad luck or if my gear was actually failing. So I spent the next hour shooting random people downtown. Tourists, shop owners, a guy filling his truck with firewood. Every shot came out perfect, sharp, balanced, crisp. Not a single issue. My camera wasn't broken, and that scared me more than if it had been. The next day, I decided to follow one of them. Probably the worst decision I've made in years. But sometimes curiosity outweighs self-preservation. I saw her, the second look-alike, the one from the bus stop, walking toward the trail behind the river. She walked stiffly, like someone imitating a walk instead of doing it naturally. I followed from a distance, using trees for cover when I could. She stepped into the forest, then deeper in, until the snow swallowed her footsteps. I lost sight of her for maybe 10 seconds. Then I saw her again, standing perfectly still between two tall pines, not leaning, not breathing, just there. I raised my camera. She didn't react. Not at first, but when I adjusted the focus, she turned her head a full 180 degrees without rotating her shoulders. The movement was slow, smooth, like watching a hinge turn where there shouldn't be one. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, almost slipping on the ice. Her eyes locked onto me, dark, reflective, empty. I lowered the camera for 1 second, and in that second, she was gone. By the time I made it back to town, my hands were shaking. I didn't realize how cold I was until I stopped moving. I drove straight to Marin's house. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been standing there waiting. "You found them?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, 2 of them, maybe 3. "I'm not sure." Her eyes narrowed. "How many photos?" "What?" I don't know. A bunch." "How many?" she repeated, faster this time. I pulled the memory cards from my bag and handed them over. She didn't even look at them before slipping them into her pocket. Then she gave me a small nod, like I'd done exactly what she expected. Not a thank you. Not a question. Nothing. Good, she said. Check near the river tomorrow. Then she closed the door in my face. Walking back to my car, something kept gnawing at me. These lookalikes, whatever they were, behaved the same way. Too still, too quiet. No eating, no drinking, no talking. Never interacting with anyone for more than a second. Like they were mimicking people without understanding how humans actually functioned. And the light. God, the way they acted around bright light. Every time a car passed or sunlight hit them directly, they flinched or angled away like it burned. But the thing that bothered me most was the way they reacted to the camera. They didn't just dislike being photographed. They seemed destabilized by it. Like their shape depended on something my lens could interfere with, something they couldn't fully hold when watched too closely. I told myself Marin must know more than she was saying, so a couple days later when she invited me to drop off more photos, I paid closer attention to her house. Everything inside was spotless, not clean, spotless. No dishes, no cups, no food on the counter, no trash can in sight, no jacket on the hooks by the door, no shoes beside the mat. It didn't look like someone lived there. It looked like someone pretended to. As she talked, I watched her face more than I listened. I counted the seconds between blinks, 10, 15, 20. At one point, I realized she hadn't blinked the entire time she was speaking. Her eyes held steady, too steady, like someone told them not to move. And for the first time since I took the job, a thought cut through all my excuses. Maybe Marin didn't want me to find someone who looked like her. Maybe she wanted me to find someone who looked like what she was pretending to be. I wish I could say I stumbled into the third lookalike by accident, but the truth is, I was pushing my luck. Curiosity had been chewing at me for days, and instead of keeping a safe distance like any sane person, I kept drifting farther into places where people didn't go alone. Icicle Ridge was quiet that morning, quiet in a way that made my breath sound too loud. Snow clung to the branches like they were holding their breath with me. That's when I saw her. Same build as Marin, same hair, same posture. She stood between the trees like she'd been printed onto the landscape. When she moved, it wasn't a step, it was a stutter, a skip, like frames missing from a video. One moment she was 10 yards ahead, the next she was 5. My fingers tightened around the camera. She cocked her head sharply, and that was enough. I stepped back. Crunching snow. Her body snapped into motion all at once, rushing me with a speed that defied physics. I ran. I didn't think. My body just threw itself down the trail as branches scraped my jacket. I could hear the absence of footsteps behind me. A silent pursuit that felt worse than any sound. I turned once, just for a fraction of a second. She was right there behind me, flickering toward me in jagged pops like reality glitched every time she moved. That's when my boot hit a rock under the snow. The world flipped. I crashed shoulder first into the ground, my camera bouncing from my grip, skidding across the ice. The sound it made when it hit the rocks was sharp enough to cut through my panic. I scrambled toward it, but the memory card shot out and cracked against the ground. I swear I saw the look-alike falter, her outline trembling like heat above asphalt. Then she simply unraveled. She didn't fall, didn't fade, just erased, like a deleted frame ripped out of existence. The forest went dead quiet. I grabbed the broken card and held it in my palm. All the warmth drained from me. I drove straight to Marin. I didn't even bother knocking properly, just one hit on the door before she opened it, staring at me with an intensity that made my throat feel tight. "Did it touch you?" she asked before I said a word. "No," I said, I don't think so." "It didn't touch you," she repeated. Not a question, a confirmation. She stepped forward, too close. No heat from her body, no breath on my face. Her hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. The pain was instant, sharp, wrong. She squeezed until my knees nearly buckled. "Marin, hey, stop." My voice cracked. She loosened her grip, not out of mercy, just calculation. Her eyes scanned me like she was looking for cracks. When she finally stepped back, the air didn't warm. Something inside me shifted. A realization I'd been avoiding settled like ice behind my ribs. Marin wasn't normal. Marin wasn't safe. Her next words were flat, like audio lagging half a beat behind lips that hadn't finished moving. "You need to keep looking." I left without answering. My wrist throbbed. Every part of my brain screamed that I should get in my car and leave town altogether, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I walked into a bar down the street, more to ground myself than anything. That's where I met Alyssa Breton. She sat alone, hood down, eyes tired but real, so painfully real I noticed it instantly. Not polished stillness, not mannequin still, human still. When I lifted my camera halfway out of instinct, she didn't recoil. She even leaned toward the light. "You can take it," she said. "I don't mind." The photo came out perfect, sharp as crystal, clean focus, every detail intact. I showed her the display. She smiled, a small, confused smile. When she caught me staring too long, she asked, "Is something wrong?" I swallowed. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" I hesitated. "Someone who doesn't look at me the way you just did." Her expression dimmed. "Her eyes don't land anywhere," she said quietly. "People like that. I don't like being around them." It wasn't confirmation, not fully, but it was enough to steady the dread in my chest. Enough to tell me Marin was something else, something wearing a person like a mask. 2 nights later, Marin texted me, "Come by, now." Her house was darker than usual. The air felt heavy, dead. When she opened the door, I saw it immediately. No shadow under her chin, even though the overhead light was glowing bright. Shadows existed everywhere else, just not on her. My breath hitched. She didn't invite me in. She just turned and walked, expecting me to follow. The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence swallowed the room. No fridge hum, no heating unit, no pipes ticking. A house that's silent doesn't exist. Not unless something's wrong. "Where are the photos?" she asked without facing me. "In my bag." "Give them to me." There was something predatory in the way she said it. I stepped back, and then she was suddenly closer. No footsteps, no motion, just there in front of me, like reality had jumped forward. I stumbled, slamming into the table. "Don't do that," she said, but the voice was wrong. The pitch wavered like 2 recordings layered out of sync. I bolted for the back door. The moment I stepped outside, she flickered into view behind me. No breath, no sound, just those jittery, stuttering leaps that didn't belong to human joints. I tore across the yard, feet slipping on the ice. She moved like gravity was optional, like momentum didn't apply. At one point, I swear she moved sideways, not turning, just sliding toward me in a straight, impossible line. I hit the slope wrong. My foot went out, and the world spun. I slid and tumbled, branches whipping my arms until I finally crashed at the bottom. I barely had time to lift my head before she appeared again, already there, standing over me with her head tilted too far to the side. Then the forest shifted. Shapes emerged from the tree line, 6, maybe 7 figures. All of them slight variations of Marin, some taller, some shorter, some with hair just a shade different, but they moved together. Not perfectly, not synchronized, but offset by milliseconds, like someone tried and failed to program them to act as one. They encircled her. Not me, her. Marin hissed, not a sound a person makes, a static surge more than a noise. She lunged, but the others were faster. They grabbed her, their hands passing through her outline like they were pulling loose threads from a garment. Her body flickered, glitched, parts of her face smudged like wet paint. A low, distorted sound vibrated through the ground. One of them turned to me, its face inches from mine. No breath, no warmth, just cold observation. It lifted a hand, fingers stiff like carved wood, and gripped my jaw. "She took faces she didn't earn," it whispered. But the voice wasn't just one voice. It was hers, layered with echoes, overlapping like a corrupted audio file. Another lookalike shoved my camera into my hands. No motion leading up to it, just suddenly placed there, like the forest rearranged itself to make it happen. "Take her," it said. "Break her." Marin writhed on the ground, flickering in and out like faulty video buffering under poor signal. Her hands clawed at the snow, but left no marks. Her mouth opened too wide, too far, the wrong amount for a skull. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But the lookalikes tightened around me, their cold fingers pressing into my skin. They weren't going to let me leave without doing it, so I lifted the camera with shaking hands. Marin's eyes locked onto mine, not fearful, not pleading, just aware. Aware of exactly what was coming. The shutter clicked. The screen showed her, distorted, mid-glitch. I crushed the photo with my thumb. The sound that ripped through the forest wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was the sound of a file corrupting, sharp, digital, violent. Marin's form jerked, collapsed inward, and then burst apart like static losing power. She was gone, not dead, just gone. The lookalikes released me instantly. I collapsed to my knees, chest heaving. One of them stepped forward, leaned down, and whispered, "You're not done." Then they all stared at me in absolute silence, their heads slowly tilting in unison. They let me walk away. But none of them looked anywhere except directly at me. None of them blinked. I didn't go back to my motel right away. I didn't go anywhere. I sat in my car at the edge of the forest for a long time, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles looked bruised. My breath kept fogging the inside of the windshield, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the way Marin dissolved, the way her shape flickered apart like corrupted data, the way those other versions, whatever they were, looked at me afterward, not grateful, not angry, just observant, like they'd been waiting for me to play my part and were now reassessing what I might do next. Eventually, I forced myself to drive. The road was empty, the snow soft under the tires, the town lights ahead looking softer than usual, like everything was slightly out of focus. I pulled into the motel lot and sat there again, watching the shadows between the street lamps. Every time the wind moved the branches, I flinched. My camera sat on the passenger seat, cracked and dirty, like it had survived something I barely escaped. It took until the next morning for the pieces to start fitting together, not in a sudden revelation, but in slow, miserable clicks that made me feel sick the more I understood. First, the camera, the photos, the blurs, the distortions, the way Marin flinched when I aimed the lens at her, the way the look-alike evaporated when the memory card broke. They weren't just sensitive to being watched, they were anchored by it, tethered to images the same way faces are tethered to mirrors. A clear photo made them stable, a blurred one weakened them, a shattered one erased them entirely. They didn't fear the camera, they depended on it. And hated it for that dependency. I kept replaying the chase in my head, the way Marin lunged for the memory card, not the camera, the way she didn't give a damn about me bleeding or running. She only cared about the photos, not to see them, not to review anything. She wanted possession of every image tying her to this place. The memory cards weren't for evidence, they were for survival. That's when the second truth sank in. Marin hadn't hired me to find someone who looked like her. She'd hired me to weaken them, to erase the competition. Every time I snapped a blurry shot, every time a photo warped, every time I deleted something unstable, I'd been chipping away pieces of those lookalikes, making it easier for her to stay intact, to stay dominant. Marin hadn't needed a photographer. She needed a weapon. And I, idiot that I am, walked straight into it because I needed a paycheck. The more I thought about her house, the more nauseous I felt. Of course, there'd been no dishes, no trash, no food. Of course, the shadows didn't fall right. Of course, she didn't blink. I kept telling myself she was private or eccentric or just cold. But she wasn't cold. She was empty. A shape held together by images she collected like bones, afraid of any picture she didn't control. By the time I packed my things, the fear had curdled into something heavier, the understanding that Marin wasn't an anomaly. She wasn't a mistake or a one-off glitch. The others in the forest, the ones who tore her apart, didn't chase me. They didn't threaten me. They didn't run from me. They simply watched, observed, like they were deciding which version of themselves deserved to keep existing, like they'd been competing long before I showed up. They weren't copies of Marin. Marin was just one of them. I left Leavenworth the next morning. I didn't check out of the motel. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I threw my duffel bag into the back seat and drove toward the highway with the kind of tension you feel when you know something's following, but you can't see it. I kept checking the rearview mirror. Nothing. But the fear didn't fade. If anything, it got worse the farther I drove. Every rest stop, every gas station, I noticed people holding still for a little too long, turning their heads a little too slowly, standing in places where they didn't seem to belong. Maybe they were normal. Maybe it was my paranoia, but I couldn't tell anymore. That doubt was worse than certainty. I didn't stop until Seattle. When I finally shut the car door outside my new apartment, my legs almost gave out. I hadn't slept in more than 20 hours, and yet I felt wired, like my nerves were plugged into an outlet. I carried my things inside and locked the door twice, then 3 times. Only when I emptied my pockets did I see the one thing I hadn't meant to take from Marin's house, her phone. I must have grabbed it by instinct during the struggle, but now that I held it, cold and silent in my hand, I understood why the lookalikes backed off, why they didn't attack me, why they didn't chase me down the mountain. A phone wasn't just communication. It was a camera, a lens, a tool for making images clear, blurry, broken, a tool that could end them if I used it the right way. The screen was cracked. The battery was nearly dead, but even powered off, it felt like a threat, a living thing, something they feared enough to let me walk away unharmed. I placed it on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to smash it just to reclaim some sense of control. But a heavier part whispered that I shouldn't, that this might be the only thing standing between me and whatever else is still out there. Because they are still out there. I know that much. Marin wasn't the only one in Leavenworth. I've replayed those silent faces moving through the trees, the way they tilted their heads, the way they converged on each other like predators fighting over territory. They compete, not for food, not for survival the way we understand it, but for existence. Only one gets to be the final version, the last copy standing. Marin had tried to make herself that version, and she would have succeeded if I hadn't broken the photo at the exact right moment. Not because I was brave, not because I understood anything, but because I panicked. Now I live with the knowledge that they know who I am. what I can do to them, what I've already done. And maybe the worst part isn't what happened in that forest. It's the realization that photographs don't just capture them, they define them. And the moment someone like me takes a picture, even by accident, we're part of their system, part of their hierarchy, part of their rules, whether we want to be or not. Some nights, I hear something on the street outside my window, too soft to be footsteps, too steady to be the wind. I turn off the lights, hold Marin's phone tight, and wait for the sound to pass. I tell myself they're far away. I tell myself they don't care about me anymore, but I know better. I helped one of them die, which means somewhere out there, the others are adjusting, shifting, reforming. And sooner or later, one of them will remember my face. So I packed what I could and left that town behind me. Seattle was supposed to feel safe. Bigger crowds, brighter lights, more noise. Noise helps you forget things, or at least bury them under something familiar. I found a new apartment on the 3rd floor of an older building, the kind where the walls hum with someone else's music, and the plumbing complains all night. I picked up small photography jobs again. Headshots, product shoots, anything normal enough to make me feel like I hadn't dragged the mountain with me. To everyone else, I probably look fine. I laugh at the right moments. I make coffee in the mornings. I answer emails like any functioning adult. But my sleep is shallow, broken. I wake up at the slightest sound. I keep my curtains closed even during the day. Some nights I fall asleep holding Marin's phone without realizing it. It wasn't until a week after I moved in that I found the bouquet on my doorstep. Simple white flowers, too clean, too fresh, too carefully arranged for anyone I knew. No name on the wrapping, just a small folded note tucked between the stems. My first instinct was to throw it away before I opened it, before I even touched it. But curiosity, the same thing that ruined everything back in Leavenworth, pushed my hand forward. The handwriting was neat, straight, wrong. I borrowed your face for a bit. I'll return it soon. My stomach dropped. I scanned the hallway, the stairwell, the windows of the other apartments. No movement, no doors closing. Just that artificial stillness, the kind I'd hoped I'd left behind in the snow. The next night, I saw him, my double, standing across the street under a flickering street lamp, arms at his sides, head tilted at an angle no real neck would tolerate. Same jacket as mine, same hair, same boots. His posture wasn't quite right, though. Too stiff, too balanced, like weight didn't matter. He didn't move when cars passed, didn't flinch when a bus rumbled by. He just watched my window, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. When I stepped closer to the glass, he didn't run or hide. He tilted his head even farther, slow and deliberate, like he was adjusting himself to match me, like he wanted me to see exactly what he'd borrowed. I grabbed Marin's phone before I could talk myself out of it. My hands shook so hard, the screen smudged under my thumb. I raised it toward the window, and that version of me, the wrong version, reacted instantly. His head cocked another few degrees, the movement jerky, eager, not afraid, expectant. Like he wanted the picture, like he needed it, the way all of them did. And the worst part is, I think I know who it'll choose next.